Welcome to A Reader's Paradise for book lovers, audiobook listeners, writers, and for everyone who loves a great story. Hello, and welcome to another edition of A Reader's Paradise. Say, if you like the interviews that you hear and the literature that's being performed for you, please take a moment to give us a 5-star rating and also leave a comment. The comments really help other listeners to find the show. So with that being said, I have a friend of mine that I've known in the literary business for a number of years. This woman is amazing. She is an author. She's a filmmaker, and we even share the joy of fitness as she does bodybuilding competitions, along with all of the other wonderful things that she does. And I do triathlons. I do Ironman triathlons. But enough about that. So, Nina, please take a moment to introduce yourself to the listeners.
Yes, hi. This is Nina Foxx. What am I? I'm a writer. I've written 17 or 18 books. I'm not sure. One of my latest, Momma Gone, which was an NAACP Image Award nominee and shortlisted for a doctoral award in fiction, is going to be going to audio. I just found that out, which is awesome. I've never had a lot of books go to audio, and so recently it seems to be a thing that's happening. So that's good, especially for people who like to listen while they commute or maybe are vision impaired in some way. They can also enjoy the joy of reading while doing other things. I am also a filmmaker. I've had several films on the film festival circuit, shorts and other web series that I produced, and was also executive producer of a film called Ass Backwards. That was a Sundance selection at night and had limited opening in theaters, and co-executive producer of 1982 with Hill Harper, which is on Amazon Prime Video out of that. And a couple of other films that were on the film festival circuit. And recently I've been trying to work more on YouTube on the short format, because I think streaming media, and I'll tell you, I do work in streaming media during the day, is like the thing that's happening. Everybody's watching on the go, on their phone. So I'm trying to really pay some attention to my YouTube channel, which has been around for a while. Right now I'm doing a series that focuses on contest prep. Earl, as you said, I'm a figure competitor. People may not know, but in women's bodybuilding, there are several levels. You can be a bodybuilder, you can be a figure competitor, a bikini competitor, and there are different levels of muscularity. And I've competed in both figure and bikini, and I had some health challenges, and I want to get back to the stage again. So I'm a cancer survivor. So after that, I actually did I competed when I was 24 in fitness, but my first grown-up adult competition, because I'm a grown woman, was post-cancer, and that was very awesome for me. But now I really, really want to be competitive. So my husband and I are going on that journey, and I'm chronicling it week by week on my YouTube channel. And it's very interesting. My husband, he's participating, but a lot of people are reaching out to me about it because this Black women health crisis. You have people trying to figure out, we're so busy taking care of other people that we forget to take care of ourselves. And yes, bodybuilding is an extreme lifestyle, but a lot of women, especially grown women, are reaching out to me saying, I have these challenges too. I fight with Reese's peanut butter cups every day, so I can really relate to you. And,
peanut butter cups. Sugar should be declared a narcotic.
It really, no, for real. It really should.
Mm-hmm.
Because but there's so many things in our culture that focus around eating, and it's not even eating healthily, that it's a struggle. And you're human. You like things. I'm in a conference, and, I like a martini, but you have to understand what those things do to your body when you have them and make a choice, right? And you want to make informed choices. And unfortunately, with a lot of fad diets and myths that we're used to, we don't always make the best choice. So I think being transparent and sharing my journey, will help other people decide how they really want to live. And it's interesting because I say in there, I know that I would go every week and get weighed in. I would complain to my trainer. This was last year, and he said to me, "This is a choice you make. You're paying me for this. So if you want to, not adhere to the plan, that's up to you, but it's your choice." He was absolutely right when he laid it down like that. I can't be mad at anyone because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. And it just gives you a feeling of control that you can't imagine, because there's not a lot of things you can control in your life, but you can control what you do and what goes into your body. And especially as a woman, control for women in the society is a lot. There's not a lot we have control over, but our body can be one of them. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at. That's what I'm working on. All those things.
Well, first of all, I don't want to, overstate the thing. Congratulations on, being a cancer survivor. I know that must have been, a difficult point for you, but you're hanging in there strong, and you sound great. You sound very healthy and vibrant and all of those sorts of things. So prayers up for you for that. And also it just seems like it's not seems like as I said, you dropped a lot of wisdom bombs there, a lot of nuggets, especially as it relates to, health and being, fit and watching what you eat. I became vegan, which has been an interesting journey, but that's due to a lot of the activities that I do with, the Ironman triathlon competitions. And so, like you, I have had some interesting health challenges. I recently discovered that I was a diabetic, did not know that. So, that's been an interesting sort of, new reality. But anyway, so moving past all of that, you are an amazing creative. You mentioned the film Ass Backwards, which I think is a funny title. And you also mentioned that you just had a book that just came out on audiobook. Tell us a little bit about that book and what it's about and what's the premise of the story.
Okay. I actually think the release date is in June. But it is available on the disc part of the audio now on Amazon. You can pre-order it, and the streaming, I don't know when that's going to happen. But that book is entitled Momma Gone, and I will tell you, it's the first book that I started writing, and it has an interesting story behind that whole thing. It's literary, very literary style. And if I had more courage, I would have let it be creative nonfiction. But when I started writing this, I didn't have that courage. I think it was really a cleansing book for me. Momma Gone is about a family. It's told from the viewpoint of a young girl. She's 7 years old when the book starts. A family that loses their mother to breast cancer and the aftermath of that. And she is really the one who takes the family to healing. It is also a story of migration in the United States. It takes place in New York, but the family has migrated north from Alabama, and parts of it take place in small town Alabama because they go back to visit family. It's also post-war. When I first wrote the book, my editor told me nobody wants to read a book about what happens to people when they come home from war, because the older brother has gone to Vietnam. Well, he's gone to war, war in this thing. And he comes home and he can't find a job. He doesn't fit into the family. He's lost his mother, and it's just a really hard time. But who would have known so many years later we would still be in wars in the Middle East? So I think that editor was wrong. Clearly she was wrong, because nominated for an Image Award. We do need those stories, because the more things change, the more they stay the same. Just as he came home from Vietnam, there are people that came home from any of the Gulf Wars and had to struggle with their new reality, their new experiences, and how they were going to fit back into what a so-called normal life and family, and nothing's normal. It's a story of it was hard for me. I always thought my mother died of breast cancer when she was 38 years old. So when I turned 38, I was like, okay, my time must be around the corner. So every year I would postpone my mammogram because I was like, they're going to find something. So when I turned 39, I was like, ooh, I'm borrowed time. Now I'm many years post that, but I'm really borrowed. And I think I had to face a lot of the things that are in the book that I didn't write about, because I was diagnosed with breast cancer. It was after the book was published, but it was still there in my head. It is just a big healing from that whole trauma of losing a parent for me. And I think I put a lot of it on the page. And the reviews, people feel it's raw. Because there are a lot of points that people can relate to, especially as Black people here, and white people as well. a lot of people are devastated by different forms of cancer, and you don't talk to your children, and they understand what they understand, and they have to make sense of it, number one. But number two, a lot of the families, our families, the thing was, we moved from the South to, where the railroads went. We went to New York. We went to Detroit, Michigan. We went to L.A. in that migration from South to North. And whereas Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Warmth of Other Suns, was a journalistic look at it, this is inside a family that's experienced it. And I think a lot of people that read in a lot of the book clubs that I talked to, they talked about experiencing those same going south to Alabama, to Florida, to Georgia, to Tennessee, to visit the family that they were left behind in that clash of two worlds.
Now, let me ask. Go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry.
So it's just the clash of two worlds between North and South and old and new, and the new ways versus the old ways, and how we, as a people, tend to be where we want to be, where all our people are, and suddenly you're not. So how do you make new family? So it's kind of a look at that.
Now, this really sounds like, as you say, a raw story, as you mentioned, an intense story. And whenever you're dealing with something like that, there's a lot that goes into it. And kudos to you for writing a story that I'm quite sure at times, as you said, was probably really difficult and revealing, and you really had to do a lot of, it sounds like, introspective work, on, this. So let me ask you this question with this particular book. Why did you choose to really write it and put it out there, as opposed to leaving this something, a little more private and just deal with it on your own, but to go ahead and create a story around, something that is just so raw, so intense, so relatable to so many people who have ever either gone through a health crisis or had to be a caregiver for someone who's going through a health crisis?
Well, I don't think I said I'm gonna put this out there. I went to the paper and I wrote what came out. I think for me it was a way of dealing with what was going on. I didn't really even realize I was doing that until I was on the other side of it. Like, oh, wow, that feels good. And I felt there were a lot of things that could go on. I wrote it over 5 years. So I just know one time I was writing a scene, because you have to, when the mother is diagnosed and she knows she's going to die, she does these human things to try and deal with her own pain. And I don't want to give any spoilers, but I was writing this one scene, and I was on a cruise.
Okay.
And I'm sitting on the deck and I'm writing, you have that day at sea, and I was boo-hooing, just tears coming down my face, not realizing why, but it's, there's something about when you write in first person and you've been in the scene.
Yeah.
And I just remember a steward coming over to me and saying, "Are you okay, ma'am?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I just had to get it together and go on and enjoy the scenery around me. But it was really painful and hard. And there were also other family things, that when a parent dies, what happens? It used to be, you go live with this kid goes to live with this relative, this kid goes to live with this relative. And the period that it was taking place, the main character, one of the main characters, the father says, "No, these are my kids. They're staying with me." And so it caused a whole bunch of family turmoil. And I took the book when it was in manuscript form and sent it to my family to read at a family reunion. And they were not mad at me, but it caused them to argue among themselves about, how come you didn't do this? And who said this? So I knew I was on track.
Oh.
Because they were more about the story and a cleansing for all of us. And I knew, although I met a lot of opposition, no one wants to hear this. I had my agent tell me, "This is phenomenal writing, but no one is ready for this from a Black writer." She told me that. I fired her, but I had an editor say, "No one wants to read about what happens after war, especially in what is clearly a Black community." She's like, "No one wants to read that." I had an agent tell me, the same agent before I fired her, that I should make it more commercial and change it to third person and, sort of round it and smooth it, because it would make people feel better. And I feel that was wrong. And it was interesting because a lot of us work with like someone who helps you develop your story at a certain point after it's written, take the bird's eye view. And he said to me, after I told him what my agent said, he said, "At a certain point, you just got to say no." And he was referred to me by my agent. So I did. I said no and waited several years, wrote all of the other very comedic other books in the middle, and then worked on it as my MFA thesis. And it was just sitting. And I knew Brown Girls Books, the authors that started that, Rashonda Tate Billingsley and Victoria Christopher Murray, were friends of mine. And their original aim was to have authors, established authors that were looking for homes for new work, a way to have a new outlet for expression. I said, I have this book here. You want that? And they were like, absolutely. And it was their NAACP Image Award book the first year. So I was glad that I was able to do a lot of things. The story helped me. The story helped my family. It helped other people. I've talked to a lot of groups about mommy issues, but it also helped a smaller African-American owned publisher become established in their field. So I felt good about it all around.
So let me ask you this question. I want to circle back a minute. I'm trying to understand, what would make an editor believe that no one would want to read such an emotionally and heartfelt book, because that's why we write, because I like to believe as writers, we chronicle the human experience in all of its forms, whether it's through health, war, famine, whatever. That's what we do as writers. We wrestle with life issues. We wrestle with the things that are difficult to deal with. And as publishers, I would, think that, that's what they would want. Some of the really complex stuff that causes people to really think, be reflective, and to understand that, understand life on maybe from a different perspective or a different level or something like that. I wonder if, because what I'm thinking of is a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I'm not sure if you ever heard of the book, but it's a war book. And it's written from the perspective of a man who went through the concentration camps. And it is such a powerful book, because one of the greatest lines that I read out of that book, he says, suffering for mankind is unavoidable. He says that's part of the gift of life. There's going to be suffering on some level, somewhere. And that nugget of wisdom rings so true with, just from reading that book, changed my life on the way I, look at things. And so to me, for you to have written a book of this magnitude just really speaks to, how this could be really transformative for someone. As you said, it has been for, other people, even in your own family, other readers. It's been transformative in some way. And, I just think it's just, short-sighted for someone to say.
Well,
Go ahead.
I think it is short-sighted too, but I think you can't look at what that whole thing without looking at the context that it was happening. So my first book was published in 1999. At that time, there were very few African-American authors published by mainstream publishers other than Terry McMillan, Eric Jerome Dickey, and maybe even Harris. So we all self-published our books, and we sold them on the road ourselves during self-financed tours. And it would happen to be, you saw your book sold on the street in New York because there were other distributors that were buying them, tearing off the cover and selling them for whatever they were selling them on the street.
Yes, I remember.
And yes, so at the time, then what happened was books by African-American authors became the number one selling genre, fiction, for every major publisher. And so then they came back and said, wait, hold up, we're missing something. Mm-hmm. And they bought all of us up. So yes. Me, Rashonda, Victoria, just a whole slew of us in that generation. They used to call us the Black Literati. They bought us all up, and the books that we were writing were commensurate with the age that we were. In our, early 30s, late 20s, we were writing comedies and fun books, a lot of sass, and at the time I think I was considered chick lit, which I don't know if they even have it anymore. But
yeah, the industry has changed quite a bit since those days. Yes.
Yeah, it has, absolutely. So here I was producing a book that was not chick lit. It was serious. It was not our experience. It was not about the Holocaust. It was about the aftermath of the Black American Holocaust, because that's really what all of that was. Mm-hmm. That juxtaposition between North and South, the struggle to fit in, the difference in, really highlight some of the differences in healthcare, all those things that were underlying our community, where our communities were becoming desegregated, which it had its positives and its negatives. When we lived in segregated communities, we had our own barbers, our own everything, and there was a lot of money to save it. And we could move. We moved. And what happened to those places where all those businesses were? They became deserts, and we were coming home to these communities. So they didn't understand that. That was not their experience. A lot of these editors, you become an editor at that time, you had some money because it's not a well-paid job. Mm-hmm. We didn't have the luxury of doing that. Mm-hmm. And so they knew nothing about this experience, and it seemed sad. Oh, it's so tragic. It's sad. It's not tragic. It's the way it is. Mm. So why would they want that experience? That experience wasn't what they knew. It was not my great-grandmother was in the Holocaust. They didn't know. We didn't consider the aftermath of American slavery and Jim Crow to be a Holocaust, but it was.
Yeah.
So you have to take all of that into context to hear these people saying, no, I'm not interested in that. I had one of my earlier junior editors, my first one. She was a junior editor. She was Black. We're still in touch now. She's no longer an editor and lives in Malawi, I think. But she said to me after one of my books, one of the early books, Get Some Love, which was a comedy compared to Brewster's Millions. It was about a young woman who was raised by her grandfather in the church in the South, was told that he left her a will. In order to get to her inheritance, she would have to have sex. And so she struggles with this the entire time of what does she do. And really the lesson is you have to be who you are, and then you will get your rewards. And that's what happened. There's a very similar book about the time by the same editor called The Accidental Version by a white author who was about a woman struggling to have sex so she would not be re-virginized. The idea being that if you don't have sex for a year, you become a virgin. Except this is happening at work at a magazine, because every protagonist at that time, written by a white author, seemed to work at a magazine, a fashion magazine or something. Mm-hmm. They optioned her book for film. Really? And they looked at mine, but they didn't option my book. And I said, that's so interesting. I want to know what lessons I can learn, so maybe my book can be optioned too. She said, it's different. They wanted white characters. I said, when I go to a book signing and I'm in Barnes & Noble, I can sell a book to everyone. It doesn't matter what color they are, and I had. And she said, well, the differences between it, we had the same cover artist, but mine depicted a Black cartoon female on the cover, and hers depicted a white cartoon female. She said, my book was a Black book, and her book was not. So that's why hers was optioned. And this is a Black woman telling me this. And I truly believe there was no malice intended. I believe she was telling me what she knew to be true at the business at the time.
Yeah.
And I said to her, I said, well, what makes her a Black book and mine a white book? She says, you're a Black author, she's a white author. I said, well, what if I'm a Black author, but my characters are white? She said, it's a Black book. I said, what if I'm a white author and my characters are Black? She said, it's literature. Mm. Let that sink in. Mm. So wow. This is what you're dealing with when you're trying to switch to write a more serious book at the time.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. And, wow. The experiences that you just described there are certainly familiar to me as well, because we both came up through that same era of the late 90s, early 2000s of Black literature and explosion and the type of books that were being published. And like you, right. I was swept up, in that same thing as well. And also like you, I went and got an MFA and I wrote a more serious piece of literature. And it's interesting that you talk about, the aftermath of slavery and what that did to families and how that becomes generational. Some of that, right. That. So what I wanted to do is I wrote a book called Lenny Gray, which followed my paternal grandparents, which went through what I call the second coming of slavery, called Jim Crow, because right. I have a grandfather who was born in 1896 and my grandmother was born in 1900, and they're from the South. And, there were 18 children that these two people had, that my grandparents had. So that's a lot of people to try to be there for financially, emotionally, spiritually, materialistically, in a segregated system that was designed to push you as close to slavery as it possibly could and keep you from any type of wealth or even knowledge. So I felt that story had to be told from from the African American perspective. And although I love, like, Soup Monk Kid and all of that, it has to be told from the lion's perspective. If not, it'll
Right.
always be told from the hunter's perspective, and you really don't understand it. I think you need to have the people from the culture, to a certain extent, tell these type of stories. Just if
Absolutely.
Okay, so we're together.
Yeah.
So we're together on that. Let me ask you, this question, because we've both been in this game for a long time, and you talk about your book, this other book being optioned for film, but I also know that you decided to do film. Was this, how did you transition from book writing to films, because that's just another form of storytelling? Was this just an expansion of your genius, or was it just something you always wanted to do?
Well, I think so. There was something in the middle there with theater. I did theater. And people always say, oh, you have a very visual style. Like the way I write my books, it's a visual thing for me. I see them and I write down what I see in my head. So one of my books, I don't remember when it was optioned for stage. It was Marrying Up. And and I had script approval and everything else. And when it opened in Atlanta, I flew to Atlanta to see it. And, there are a lot of writers in Atlanta that I know that are friends, and they came. And I just remember my brother, he was sitting next to me. And what I had agreed to was not what was on the stage. It was like they couldn't pull it off. It was horrible. My brother turned to me. He says, you didn't write that. I was like, no, I didn't. And so I leveraged my rights back, and I was done with it. I said, I'm not doing that again. That was horrible. And it was funny because when it was options, I called my friend Eric Jerome Dickey, and I said, because this has happened to him.
Right. I remember that.
Right. And he said, don't do it. And, you're like, oh, stars in your eyes. I want to do this. And so at any rate, then about a year later, and there was music associated. The woman who played the lead character, her name was Melinda Doolittle. She came in second in American Idol. Excuse me. And I'm looking at her sing, and someone turns to me and says, well, why didn't you do that play thing again? Because she is fabulous. So I thought about that, and I wanted to do the play. So I found a place to learn how to do playwriting. Now, understand, before I had an MFA, I also had a master's and a PhD in something else. So I knew how to learn, if nothing. I knew how to learn. So I went to the Commercial Theater Institute in New York and took a boot camp, a course on how to produce commercial theater. Of course, it was geared toward Broadway, because that's what, with these mega sort of budgets. But I felt there was something in the middle between Chitlin Circuit, like Tyler Perry, no shade to Tyler Perry, because he obviously did well for him, and Broadway, that would appeal to people like me, our people. Mm-hmm. And so I sat down and rewrote the script. I even wrote some music. I hired some people, rented a theater, cast the show, and several months later, we opened. And I had Rashonda Tate Billingsley, who was my friend. She was my assistant stage manager. I flew in people. I flew in cast. And you can actually see that. You can get this DVD on Amazon now. It's distributed by Urban Home Entertainment. I had Tony Terry and Little G from Silk and Keisha Hunt, comedian from America's Got Jokes, and opened that play myself. Learned a lot, and it was like so much work. At one point, I remember right before it was, corralling authors, corralling actors, all sorts of things, and dealing with people who sounded good in audition, but then when you got them to sing and they were standing next to Tony Terry, and Tony Terry can really sing, I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work. Rewriting songs and scenes so they wouldn't have to sing. And I looked up and had like 40 something people working for me. Wow. And I knew then. So I was raised in New York. A lot of people, I was not raised in the South. I don't possess that religiosity that a lot of people seem to when you are raised that way in the South. But I just knew that there was something bigger than me helping me right then, and felt overwhelmed. I was like, this is why you're grateful, because it was really awesome. And then it was so much fun. I had a big fight. I hired a company to video, because I knew, having gone to many book signings that then independent Black booksellers or independent booksellers one of the things that they sold a lot of was DVDs. And
Right.
I knew that I could sell a DVD in addition to my book. And I was like, this is great. So I hired someone to video it. And one of the things that happened was I don't think they were not African American, not that matters, but I don't think they underestimated what was going to happen here, because we opened on Super Bowl weekend. So I came out what was the way to fill the seats in this 300-seat theater anyway. Sponsored groups, had Wounded Warriors tickets, did all sorts of things, and filled that theater for the entire weekend. And they saw all these people, and they were like, we did not ask for enough money to do this.
Really?
And just so you know, it was $10,000, which is no small feat for someone who was paying out of their pocket.
Yes.
Like, I was writing a check. I didn't have any underwriters, anything like that. And they held my master's hostage. So the master is the master copy of your recording. And that is what all of your copies will be made from.
Right, the master, yes.
So they're like, oh, we didn't know it was going to be this big. It's cost too much. And, we need another $5,000. So I was sitting in the office, and I was so angry. At this point, you've come this long journey. It's months and months, and I'm expecting to go to the office expecting to view a rough cut. And that's not what happened. They were demanding money. And the man who was heading up the organization, which is now gone, it was the San Antonio Film District, I'll say it because they're gone, was yelling at me in my face like he was my father. So I just remember picking up the phone and calling my lawyer, who's out of Philadelphia, who's an entertainment business lawyer, who'd done all of the contracts with the actors for me. And I just held the phone up in the air so he could hear what was going on. And he said to me, he's a big dude, let's just say.
Okay.
He said to me, turn around and leave. I'll be there tomorrow. And he got on a plane, and I'll say his name is James Elam. I know if he's listening, James, he was about the business. He got on a plane, came down, walked into the office, and said, now, what is the problem? I walked out of there with my master's, let's just say.
Wow.
And it was like he was a combination lawyer and a brother watching a Black woman be disrespected by someone from another race in a way that was totally inappropriate. He handled it. We walked out of there with the master. So,
well, that sounds like a book in and of itself.
It might be. But it was. So I was just so done. Then I was like, let's just get it on DVD. And then I had the opportunity to move to California, and that whole thing with the filming made me curious about filming and wanting to learn. So actually, with the same lawyer, James Elam, we came up with an idea for a reality show about shoes, because me, shoes.
I saw that. I actually, you were in California. You were in California.
Yes, I was in California. And so we worked on it, wrote the treatment, recorded it. We pitched it as actually a reality series, but it ended up being a web series, and that's fine. But that was a learning project for me about producing and editing and everything. And then I did another short, because based on another book, Just Short of Crazy. People were like, what happened to the people after? And normally as a writer, I'm like, they're not real.
I saw that too. I saw that short film too.
Yeah. So I wrote a short about that, and it put that in film festivals. And then people asked me to work on their films, which are producing features, which were kind of awesome. And just, I think the web series thing, I was sort of ahead of the web series wave, because someone from, I think, BET at the time was interested in it, won awards, learned about the film festival circuit and how that worked. And so that's how I ended up doing film, and learning about the different aspects of producing and editing and casting. And now I'm sort of you see some of it blended in my YouTube channel. The first episodes of what I'm working on now is called The Struggle is Real, and it's about the fitness journey. It's first episodes, the first 2 weeks, I'm getting ready to put the third video out, which is the second week, is really about, they're like a video diary almost. But by the third week, there's going to be some more cinematic treatment and things that are happening that you're like, oh, she is really hurt. So things like that. So you'll see some of it blended in there, and how those are working. And I think I am, like you said, just a creative, and I create whatever medium comes to me at the time.
So
right now I'm playing with video.
let me ask you this question, because with being a creative, a writer, storyteller, and those sorts of things, and the way the industry is changing so much. It went from printed books to digital books to audiobooks, even short film, web series, that sort of thing. Because I know I've taken my young adult books and I went ahead and I learned how to do film. I went and I spent money on equipment and that sort of stuff to shoot short film for a web series based off of my young adult book. And so for me, I think the technology, or the story that I'm telling myself, is that the technology has made it a bit easier for creatives to get their work out in a way that just was not available, as short as 5 or 10 years ago. And so I want to ask you, as a person who's had a hand in film, stage play, books, short film, what do you see are the trends now in the industry? What do you think is going to happen? How are readers or people who enjoy storytelling going to enjoy? Is there one platform that's outperforming the others that you know of, or is it can you have any sense of that?
So I think it's not about outperforming. I think as people change, like younger people are watching less television, they're streaming, they're reading less books, they're listening, and they're watching video. I think the way industry is changing. Would love to talk about how it had good things and bad things. Because when we first started out, self-publishing a book was like, oh, you can't self-publish a book. What is that?
Yeah.
That's like, yeah.
Yeah.
But now,
really down upon, yeah.
Now it's like, yeah, I'm going to self-publish my book because I'm going to make more money. So it's different. So, and a lot of that is the advent of Amazon and the things that they own. And as a disclaimer, I used to work for Amazon. I loved it there. And was building the things that are helping technology really integrate into your home. So
you're not at Amazon. You're no longer there. Okay.
No, I work for HBO Digital. So
okay.
I build the streaming apps that you watch all this content on. So of course it makes sense for me to be in a place like that with what I do. But so you had a lot of, I guess I'm always a history lesson. So we had a lot of independent booksellers, because you would go into the majors if they existed and you wouldn't see any books by people of color. You would know that you would go to Black Images in Dallas, Texas, run by Emma Rogers, no longer there, because you would find all the books you wanted in one spot, in a cozy spot, and someone that knew about it. And then Amazon came along, and I owned one of the first e-readers. It was not owned by Amazon at the time. It was owned by the people that owned the satellite, Gemstar. And people were like, this isn't going to work. I remember at Book Expo, which is the big trade show, people saying, this is horrible, it's not going to work. And they started to monopolize the book business by selling books online. So I could live in a place where there were no Black bookstores and suddenly get books by all my authors. But when we're thrown in there, how do you find them? You had to know who they were. And then they got into the e-reader business. And so people were not using as many paper books. So things changed a little bit there. Like you see the advent of it. Now then YouTube started coming, and younger people I remember nobody had a phone but drug dealers, and now everybody has a phone. You can stream all that free, and so you're watching content there. I think you have to be able to be in multiple content places. Self-publishing is fine, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it's great and I can say this because I've had books published by every big publisher and then some small ones. And, after Momma Gone, I wrote 2 books. One went to the same Brown Girls books, and that was called Catfish. I got more courage to write about issues, and that was about date rape. No, Catfish was about internet safety for young people. And then after that was And You Better Not Tell. That was about date rape. I self-published And You Better Not Tell on the Amazon platform. I made more money on that book because I'm not paying as many people.
Right.
And it's easier for you to look more professional. But I also sell more digital books. I get a check every month because there's certain people that want to read that way. So I think you have to be versatile and know that people think, I'm going to write a book, I'm going to be rich. You're not going to be rich unless you're like Stephen King.
Yeah.
And he took a long time to get there, right?
Yes.
You are creating, you have to be willing to create because you love to create and tell your truth that way, and be willing to try multiple platforms to get your work out there. Yes. And you think with the more digitalness that it's easier. It is not. When 20 years ago, we had to go to all these bookstores to hustle and sell our books and get on the road.
Yes.
Now, you still have to find ways to sell it, but those bookstores are gone. So you need to find a way to reach your audience that may not be what you think it was in your head. And one of the things I think that means, yes, that's good and bad. But one of the things that we had then was we would be on the road, and you and I were on the Walmart Soul Expressions tour together on the bus.
We were. Yes, we were.
We had this community. I would go and say, this weekend I'm going to this bookstore, I'm going to St. Louis. And I would see other writers. We'd we'd sign before each other. We'd go on tour together.
Yes.
We several of us had the Femme Fantastic tour where we toured military bases around the country. We had a community. Writing is a solitary occupation. We had the community because we created it. We were on the road. We used to go on the Page Turner Summit at Sea, which is the big book club summit that happened on a cruise ship for 5 years. Those things are all gone. So actually one of the things that I'm doing this year is I have created the Writing Sisters Summit at Sea. It's a workshop where I was inviting people who are writers to come for a weekend on a short cruise through the Bahamas because I want that community again. And what that will allow us to do is myself, I've asked Victoria Christopher Murray, Rashawn Tate Billingsley. I asked you to come, but, I don't know what you're doing. And we also have Latoya Smith, who's an agent, to talk about work and to workshop some of our work. But it's a way for all of us to get to know each other because I'm like, I don't know who the next pack is. So we can share, learn from each other, and find creative ways to get our work out there. Otherwise, it's just not. That's the downside. The community doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, the community has definitely changed, and so many authors who came up like you and I did as self-published authors who worked so hard to get a traditional deal, only to find that did not last or did not pan out the way that we anticipated that it would. And so many of us have lost contracts or what have you, and have gone back to our roots with self-publishing and trying to establish almost like reinventing ourselves with our work, and as you said, how we distribute it, how we get it out there, and those sorts of things. And then also, I don't know if you know this, but on YouTube now, there's a subculture on YouTube called AuthorTuber and BookTuber. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those. Next time you're on there, Google that. And what you will find is that next generation of young writers and readers, they're on YouTube marketing their work and their things, and that's how they are connecting to their audiences through subscriber lists. Of the old email list now is how many people are subscribed to your channel and how much influence that you have. And so when I came across that, I was just blown away by the younger generation who are really leveraging technology in a way that I just did, just was not in my in my sphere. And I'm just like, wow, this is just like really different. It's really another way for readers to connect with the writers of work. Some writers even like, hey, I'm having a writing night, and they'll just go live and they'll write and answer questions from people who are watching them while they write. It's really an interesting way to, I guess, process a book. Let me ask you this. What is your next project? What is your next book that you're working on? Or is it a book, a stage play, film? What's the next thing? Or is it all of them? Or is it all of them?
It's all of them. Although I did self-publish my book, As You Better Not Tell, my agent has several things that she is shopping. I also worked on another anthology about fathers, where I did an anthology that was published by Simon & Schuster, where I had female writers, write a letter to their mother and tell them something they couldn't tell them before, and then have a story that was associated with it, with the caveat that it had to have some positive focus, and that was great. So I wanted to do a follow-up with fathers because I'm a big father fan, being raised by my father. And then I had a hard time with it because what happened, I thought I would get all these submissions, and the mother book was hard enough because it was like I had to do therapy with a lot of people. It was harder than they thought. They called them crying. I had to pull them through. The father book, almost all of the Black men dropped out. Yeah,
me included.
So that hurt me in a way on another level. Well, I didn't think I thought it was like I'm about the book business. It was so personal because I didn't know why that was. I didn't know if it was they didn't have time, they didn't respect me enough. The father where a woman would say, I'm having a hard time with this. Maybe the father part was too hard for them.
Mm-hmm.
But, and that's why I talk about that in the beginning. And so I'd like put it down for a year. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
So now I have the manuscript that I have and examining what that means, writing the beginning and end of it. And so that may come. It's called Daddy's Lesson. So,
and to interrupt you real quick, I didn't say anything because it was private at the time, but, now I'm okay with it. At the time that offer came around, I was in the throes of being a caregiver for my father.
And see, these are the stories that are in the mother book as well. And I understand that. But I think part of it is that men don't talk about that.
Yeah, it was. I had to go sit on the couch after that because there were going through, because he had prostate cancer. He did not tend to it. And, at the end, I, had to step in and do a lot of things that I just did not see coming. And, I had my own, emotional roller coaster with that, I had to go and try to, figure that out. And, at the end of life, when end of life happened, it took me a minute to just get back to a good place, because that was probably that was the most difficult thing I've had to do, is to watch. That is totally, totally understandable.
Mm-hmm. And my question to you is, what did that teach you? What is the one thing that you would say, my father taught me this?
He taught me how to forgive him.
Well, I would love to hear about that in the story.
Yeah.
But we get personal. So it
was about learning how to let go of my boyhood expectations of him. That, all of those unmet expectations of him, and to realize he was a human being. He had his flaws, and, I had to just, be okay with that and not still want him to show up in a way that I wanted him to show up and not the way that he knew how to show up.
So that, hopefully, is one of the projects that will come soon. So.
Yeah. I can, if you still do it, I can, I will commit to it. If because I need to do that.
It's on the record now. You have to do it.
Yes, I have to do it. So if again, I will, if you send me again the outline or the guidelines, I will definitely get on that, because I have been meaning to write it. It has been on my heart. Just like you say, the book that you just wrote about the breast cancer, this one has been on my heart to write, to really get into and just get this out, give birth to this, because I'm pregnant with it. I can tell you that now. I am pregnant with it.
Well, I don't want to guilt you into it, but that was
I'm not guilty. I'm not guilty. I'm not feeling guilt. You're not guilting me into it. It's like I am pregnant with this, and it's one of these things. It's like when, as a writer, when you have something like that happens, sometimes it takes a little bit longer for you to process everything and to be able to express it, in a way. And like you said, you were on the cruise ship, going through this, and you were crying, and people were asking you, okay. And that's part of the writing process when you're writing something like that. This is not only going to be an alone event, it's going to be an emotional event. It's going to be a lot of, digging into places to let that light come in, to let that healing come in. And then through your journey, you are able to help others who have gone through a similar situation, or maybe going through something, that you are. And in fact, right now I'm narrating a book by a self-published author named Anthony Ellis McGee, where he has written a story called Under the Same Roof about how siblings, the main character is a mother who's sickly, and he is the responsible sibling, or one of the characters is the responsible sibling, and the other two are not. And it's just dealing with those family dynamics of, who's going to take care of mom, as she's dealing with these different things. So yeah, I'm familiar with that, and I will commit to that, hands down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have a recording of you saying that now.
Yeah. So. Yes, you do. Well, Nina, I want to be respectful of your time again. I mean, we can chew on this all day, but I want you to tell the readers where they can, or the listeners of the podcast, where they can find you, where they can find your books, where they can find your DVD from the stage play, and all of that good stuff. And even for me, I want to know because I want to support you, and I want to buy the DVD. So is it streaming? Can you download it, or is it?
For a while it was streaming, but I don't know on Netflix. But I don't know if it is anymore because they take things out. Okay. But the DVD is on Amazon. It's called Marrying Up. I did another play after that, but I separated the recording, and I would love to do that again, just to record it. So that may be coming as well.
So are you saying like you would just have an audio recording of the play?
No, I have a different play that I wrote and produced. I actually had a grant from the city of Seattle to produce a play 2 years ago called Just Short of Crazy, which I did at the Langston Hughes Performing Arts Center, but I did not record it for mass distribution. I just have a screener of it, and I would like to either workshop that like at one of the Black Theater Festivals, or do a professional recording of it.
I got to reach out to you, offline, because I would really like to, get a sense of like, when you want to find out about the theater circuit or the film circuit, like where do you start? Just a starting point, and then I can go from there. But, we can take care of that offline. Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah. And so do you have a website?
I do. So NinaFoxx.com, 2 X's, NinaFoxx. The other thing is you can find out about the Writing Sisters Summit at Sea at clevervixenmedia.com. So you can contact me either way. You can also find me on Facebook, of course. My YouTube channel is called The Vixen Chronicles, as is my blog. So if you search that, you'll find me.
Okay. And the last thing I know about you from being on the bus tour with Walmart is shoes. How are you? How are you hanging with your shoes? You still got a ton of shoes?
I do. So it's really bad. So I'm at a conference. It was a 4-day conference. I think I had 6 pairs of shoes, and I wore every one. And so my husband went home where I'm going to work in New York, and he took some of my shoes and my hats because this is what I do.
This is what you do.
Everybody has a vice,
Yeah, everybody has a vice. Well, Nina, thank you so much for taking time with us to chat with us here on the Reader's Paradise. I really appreciate you, and I will be in touch.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.